Matthias is here, your trusted advisor. We will talk about data pipelines in Microsoft Fabric. First, I will show you the theory and draw as always, and then I will get you some hands-on, some demonstrations. Enjoy. Let's get a little bit through the theory in data pipelines. Well, of course, as always, we have our Fabric periodic table, and we can have a short look on that. And you see the data pipeline is located in the data ingestion part here, the green one. This is our data pipeline. We have all the documentation, all that stuff here that helps you to get a little bit idea and documentation and so on. But I will today give you, I think, the main concept, and then we can work for that on it through the demonstrations. So, well, basically, what is the idea? The idea is to move data. It's not so much about transformations, but it's more about bringing data into Fabric in some way, or bringing data into the correct location in Fabric. So the typical workflow is like that. There's some kind of trigger at the very beginning. Trigger that is, for example, triggered by an external event. Something comes in, triggered by schedule, triggered manually, depends. And from that on, we have typically some kind of authentication, either the workspace managed authentication or something else. So that's authentication. And from that authentication, there is a resolution of the initial parameters. Next is parameter resolution. You can give parameters to the pipeline to make it more flexible, which is very, very helpful, right? And then we have the lookup activities. So there is some metadata. Depending whether you have metadata-driven pipelines, which makes them even more flexible, means their metadata is stored outside of the pipeline. There is a very, very nice video about that in my YouTube channel. I will link it for you. So this is a lookup activity. And then the stuff starts, right? So then it's like there's a big control flow. We can draw it like that, control flow. Control flow means that we decide whether the pipeline is at the end of their activities, whether everything is fine and so on, error handling, all that stuff, right? So in the control flow, so if everything is great, we typically start something like copy activity. Copy activity means you want to copy data from one point to the other. So for example, from the file system to the data warehouse. So from any file system, I mean cloud-based file system, with storage account, for example, to Lakehouse. Something like that. After the copy, there might be some post-processing that you want to involve directly. And if you have a huge amount of data, you could also create a for each loop and go into parallel processing to speed things up or make it a little bit more flexible. Either way, at some point you are at the post-processing area, and the question is, okay, is there transformation required? Transformation required. It could be. I didn't mention that yet. We will look at that later a little bit. Basically, you usually use pipelines to load the data into the bronzy Medallion structure. And when you do that, there is sometimes some modification, some transformation needed, but not so much, because the transformation will happen to silver and to gold, right? But anyway, when you need some kind of transformation, you can do that with PySpark, which means notebooks. PySpark notebook, right? You could also call a dataflow Gen2, with your M query transformation. This is Power Query, right? M query. In any way, after this transformation, there will be a load to target. Yeah. When you don't need any transformations, so transformation required no, then you will load the data directly to the target, of course. Our question is always, is there success? Do a green check mark there. When you have a good success, then you will typically have some kind of monitoring where you can report pipeline succeeded. Everything is great. When you have errors, then you need an error handling. Of course, with some kind of retry max. Retry max. Because at some point you will not retry, then you will simply stop that stuff. Right? There's then on error typically something that you want to do, and there's also some kind of activity, for example, send an email or something like that to notify the people, and you will also report to the monitoring hub, but no success, but an error in this case. In any way, there is at some point pipeline end. This is here. So your pipeline has finished. So this is a typical like walkthrough how the pipeline works in many scenarios. When we look at an ingestion way, so the medallion structure, right? Then we start with external data sources. External data sources. That could be something like our famous SQL Server, or it could something like REST, or something like those applications, or something like on-premise data gateway, or you name it, file storage. We will have file storage later in the demonstration, so let's draw file storage here. So different data sources, and from all these data sources, typically you have the copy data activity, copy data in our pipeline. Oh, that wasn't nice. Let's correct that a little bit. Looks better. There we go. So everything leads to our copy data activity, and from that on, it could be that we need some kind of staging area. When we have very complex transformations, that could be then an ADLS V2, for example. We might need some schema mapping, type, and so on, right? To do that. And after all that, this is our pipeline, right? From here on, this is pipeline. From there on, we load the data in our bronzy Lakehouse. So this is like the first time that the data is then really in Fabric. From there on, of course, we want to go to silver. And between bronzy and silver Lakehouse, typically there are transformations. You can have two different types of transformations, as you can all know. We could have notebooks to wrangle with the data, which is Python code, or we can use dataflow Gen2 to modify our data. That could be the other way that we do. And from silver, there is some way to gold, which is for today not in our focus. So let's simply assume that there's some move to gold. And it could be, or usually this is then a data warehouse for all your analytics needs. And from there, the data goes out again, right? So this is like the consumption. Power BI, or something like AI models, ML models, right? Or some custom apps. something like that. So this is like the opposite. From data in, we have data out, where the data then is consumed. And you see, the pipelines play a crucial role when you get the data into Microsoft Fabric. That's absolutely immediate, right? There is something like metadata-driven ETL architecture. This is our introduction into pipelines, so I don't want to get too deep into that topic for today. But as I said, that's a really great interview, and we will have a separate session where we get a little bit deeper into metadata-driven architectures. But in any way, the idea is you have a configuration database, where you store all your metadata about the source systems, the source table, the target table, watermark values, and so on. So you know what needs to go where. And from there, or on top of that, or below that, depending, you have your master pipeline. And the master pipeline reads all the data from the configuration database and creates the actions out of that data, right? So basically it pulls every table that it needs to deal with, and triggers the appropriate action, right? And from there, typically there are then actions like notebooks or sub pipelines or something like that. This is child pipeline. And in this child pipeline, it's the stuff executed. You have this watermark with the last modified date, so you know where to start off, right? And so you don't have to start from the very beginning. So this is the watermark here, and then you run your copy activity, after that copy activity, you update the watermark, of course. You have some kind of error handling attached, and you have monitoring and logging attached. Basically, that's the idea. So what we have talked about in the first part is basically this one, like if you would do everything manually, and we add on top like a control plane that steers everything, that knows what needs to go to where, and of course then the magic happens that you use, in this case here, variables, right? That's the idea. So you can use the same child pipeline for different purposes, and it's flexible, right? So that's the idea, and that's the introduction for today. You have a little bit different situation in real time, and I think it might be worth that we have a short look at real time. So when you have real time, you have real time data sources, like as you have as this real time. Oh, there we go. And you have real time data sources that could be also REST, of course, right? IoT, Kafka, Event Hub, Azure Event Hub, and all that stuff, right? From there on, your data goes into streaming ingestion, and the first step is event stream. So this is like the pipeline for getting the continuous data in, right? This is time analytics. This is time-based. So your data flows just into Microsoft Fabric, and from there you can deal with the data. You can window the data and so on, and you can trigger the event for the pipeline if you want. So you can, from that event pipeline, then move on and run the pipeline. On that event. In that pipeline, you have again the copy activity, right, as always. And from the copy activity, you can write into the Lakehouse raw, right? And from that Lakehouse raw data streaming, you could then trigger more stuff like notebooks for real-time event handling, for real-time batching, time aggregation, and so on. And from there, you could write into the KQL database. Right. Or from there on, you have again all the consumers like Power BI, like custom applications, like ML models, you name it. So what's the benefit? Why would you do that instead of pushing the stuff directly from event stream into your KQL database, which is the event house? So what's the benefit? The downside is, of course, you need more capacity, more performance, and so on. The benefit is that in this case, you can aggregate, and the magic is here, basically, right? You can deal with your data in a more professional way. It could even happen that you have two flows, right? You have like a real-time flow that shows the latest 100 values and so on. But in the same way, you have this archive flow. And the archive flow is for historical data. And for the historical data, you usually don't need the temperature value every second, right? So this is then happening, and that's at that stage. Every second you can do with windowing, but there are more aggregations that are not so easy to do in the event stream. So the capabilities in the event stream are quite limited. So that's why it could be a very nice way to step into that pipeline and do the aggregation, and you can help yourself with the windowing functions, so you can split up the data flow in the event stream either for real-time or for historical data. And so even in the real-time world, the pipeline can make a terrific job to help you to get all the data available. So well, that's from the theory part for today. We have as always, some community input and community questions that I could answer. First of all, well, how is about a data factory in Fabric? Are there issues with larger data sets, right? The problem is the copy activity is timing out, for example, after 1 hour with a 50 gigabyte data set. Well, basically the solution was to increase the DIU from automatic, which is 32, to manual, so you have and to enable parallel copies. And so this speeds things much up from 60 plus to 12 minutes. So just think about when you have larger data streams and later larger data into to not rely only to auto tuning. Of course, this is getting better. Next question from the community part. When Azure Fabric versus Azure Data Factory, when to use each? So you have a product called Azure Data Factory. So basically, Azure Data Factory functionality is integrated into Fabric, and you can use all the Fabric goodness from the platform, like workspaces and so on. So when you have very specific use cases or existing Azure Data Factory stuff that you need to run in the same way as provided, that's possible. But in general, you should build everything new on top of Fabric, right? So most organizations are transitioning into Fabric, and it's a good idea to follow them, right? Next question was, how about Microsoft Fabric for enterprise data pipelines? How is the production experience? How is the real world stuff, right? So there were feedback like, hey, we have 220 tables with 3 different pipelines, right? We have continuous incremental load, right? We have Power BI dashboards running directly on the pipeline data. The point is, you should take a look at your workspace capacity so you don't hit your CUs that are assigned to you, right? And lessons learned is test always with realistic data. When you only test with test data and then your realistic data production data comes around the corner, then you could run into a problem because your capacity is out of luck. And then things become a bit tricky, to be honest, right? Because when your data import stands still and your reporting stands still, things are not so funny anymore. So next question is how to handle errors, right, without terminating the whole pipeline. So we have a lot of copy activities. Some fail because of transient errors or whatever. So you have an on-failure path for the copy activity, and you can log the error to a table. And you can set the for each continue on error on true, and then after that error, the pipeline is continued. Of course, that must match your business expectations. Managed identity versus service principal, when to use what. So preferred in general is the workspace identity, the workspace managed identity. An alternative could be a service principal with a key value secret, a keyword secret that you store in a keyword. That could also help, but when you have the capability to go with the managed identity from the workspace, you should do that. Next question was about staging versus a direct copy. What's the performance difference, right? Should you enable staging for SQL Server to Lakehouse copy or not? Basically, the experience was, well, staging use only that for incompatible stuff. For example, when you go from Oracle to SQL Server, direct copy is always faster when you can use it. Next question that is raised from time to time is, well, how about, well, the DIU consumption is higher than expected. How about costs and so on? So first of all, how often is your pipeline run? Is it really needed? How it's about watermarking, right? And you can set the manual DIU caps instead of relying on the automatic stuff. You should, of course, try to schedule the heavy load stuff a little bit off peak if possible. You could also put that on a dedicated capacity to iron things out and to avoid the noisy neighbor problem. So, well, that's for the theory part. Now let's switch over to our demonstration. And we are in our beloved Fabric interface, and first we need to get some data in, which means we need to create a lakehouse. So we need to name the lakehouse. I've speeded up the stuff just a little bit to make it well, better for you to follow. And our lakehouse is loaded, and once this is loaded, we will need to insert the data. The first flow is a data flow. The second one will be the pipeline. So this is a customer dimension data. This is essentially a CSV that I've already pre-downloaded and then will re-upload again just here. And in the data flow, there are no modifications made, which is fairly simple. So the second flow of the data then is coming from the pipeline part. You see, I simply say, hey, I want to insert the CSV. You must be aware that you need OneDrive access, because when you upload file, and this is uploaded to your OneDrive, so you need a OneDrive for that. You can store the data in advance on your OneDrive, then the upload is already done. Whatever is more convenient for you. And now we import the data. That's fairly simple. And after we have done that, we can simply hit data flow save and run. We will do exactly that, and it will run after a short second. Then the data is loaded into our lakehouse. That's very, very easy, I think. So this is the first data stream. The second data stream then is a pipeline, and we can combine these data streams after all that stuff in a semantic model, but this is not our focus for today. So just for checking the stuff, there's like the dimension, customer dimension now loaded into our lakehouse. After the stuff is loaded, you see we now can test it. I've prepared a very short SQL. This is always, I think, a good idea and a good practice to do exactly that, because then you are sure that the data is there. It's very easy when you have numbers that you can check. Because, for example, two columns that should provide the same result or something like that. You know, okay, that works. That's fine. We see our table there inside, and so we can work with that. And To symbolize this a little bit, we can create our first semantic model and include this dimension customer data. I always find this a very fascinating demonstration, of course. So this is our semantic model for the customer dimension. Because after we have created that, we can simply generate an auto report. And with this auto report, you will see in a second, the visualizations are stunning for that, given the fact that you didn't do anything basically, except bringing just the data in there. So now we have nice visualizations. So this part is working. Let's go back. Don't save the report, and let's create our data pipeline then. That's the idea for today, right? That's the main focus. We have to name the pipeline. This is the from the data ingestion from the source to our lakehouse, and the source in this case is an Azure storage account. It's public available data. It's sample data, which means that we can very simply just insert our URL and load the data. So first of all, we need to copy data activity. You have heard about that in the series, so that's very common that you have copy activity. Name them properly. That's very important. You will start with 1, you might end up with 20. It's always great to know what's the meaning of the different data copy activities. And now we can select our data source, which is the blob storage account. And after we have selected that blob storage account, the next thing, see, it's loading, and we can then click view more to see all the data sources, and then go to our Azure, not file, by the way, Azure storage account. These are the connection settings. We should name it properly. The URL is URL is not a good name, right? This is worldwide import sample data, and we can hit connect. And after that, the data source is connected. It's very straightforward, I think. In that case, after we have done that, what we need to configure is, of course, not only the source, but the target. The data needs a place. In this case, the idea is to put it into Lakehouse. And so, well, this is the location of the data. So I need to fill in the proper paths. And now there's a destination. For the destination, we will select our Lakehouse, which is already in there, right? Lakehouse. There we go. We need to select the connection name. Now we need to select the Lakehouse name. And what's important here is we import the data, right? Which is literally, so we import the files, which means we provide a file path. This is WWI raw data. And now we can run our pipeline, save and run. And then the pipeline is copying, as the activity said, the data from the source, which is a storage account, to the target, which is our folder in the Lakehouse. That means that the data is still not yet a table. It's just sitting as files in the Lakehouse. So there is something missing to kind of convert these data into tables. And the missing link in our case is the notebook. So expect that in a short second we will insert and we will activate a notebook with appropriate Python code to do exactly that. So there's a progress indicator, and it will not take very long, and then all the data is succeeded and imported. I have imported also the notebooks, which is first to create the tables, and then we do some business aggregations. So we can now attach the notebook to our Lakehouse. So they are already in the workspace, but now we can attach it to the Lakehouse, which is exactly what we want to do. And then we will see our Python code and load the data through the notebook. There's something hanging in the interface, which is okay. Happens from time to time. But in a second, then you have the browser, and now you can select we can select the first notebook here. open. It's already imported. It's just the link to the Lakehouse, and this is a simple code, right? We read the packet files, and then we write it into tables, and we can run it. And after we've run it, we have the different tables in our Lakehouse. That's the result. The next notebook that we want to open is the business aggregation. That does, on top of this imported data, some business aggregations. So we can simply run that too. There's some SQL, Spark SQL code, right? Run everything. And after this was executed, we will see that we have one table more with the proper business aggregations. So this is the whole walkthrough, and you see the pipeline plays a crucial role, but it's also like a simple role, right? There's more complicated stuff, more sophisticated stuff involved in for example, in this case, in the notebook side, which is absolutely okay. But I think it's important to understand that the pipelines are usually at the beginning of data ingestion. It's about bringing data into Fabric, and this needs to be absolutely reliable. And it is a very, very important step, but it's usually not the case, the step where you do very sophisticated stuff, right? That's a thing that I want to point out here. When we now go back to our Lakehouse and simply refresh the tables, after some seconds, we will see that there is a new table with the business aggregations, 2 new tables, the sales, right? And we can click on that and see that the results are there. So things are working.